This baby piano does not have functional octave equivalency, which is a fact that irks me to the depths of my soul, but is also kind of awesome in the same breath. So what's going on here? Well, this note right here is supposed to be the same note as this note up here, just an octave apart. And well, it's not. But don't worry, because I think that this defect actually allows us to bend the rules of harmony as we know it and possibly create a whole new mode. Yeah, let's do the thing. Okay, first of all, I want to show you just how incalculably the design of this thing is. The keys are laid out in a diatonic 7-note scale, kind of in the key of A major. This means that if we start here at the root and go up 7 notes, we should end up at the same note, just an octave up, or that this note is double the frequency of this note. In tuning theory, this means we've gone up 1200 cents, and that these two notes should represent a 2-to-1 relationship. But listen to what happens when we actually do that.
Well, that was unexpected.
I mean, it sounds interesting, but it doesn't sound like an octave. If we look under the hood of this imposter octave, we can see that the higher A is about 40 cents flat of the target pitch class of our root. I am assuming, by the way, that this note is our base frequency to which we can compare all other notes to, instead of comparing this A to what it should be if A was set at a frequency of 440 hertz, because, of course, this thing isn't really tuned to A440 either. Our root note is actually closer to A half sharp than it is to A from a macro perspective, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna ignore all that and move on. This is just one of the staggering amount of factory defects that this thing has. And look, I get it. At the end of the day, this thing's just a toy. How much can you really expect out of it? But I don't know. Maybe getting the order of the accidentals right might be a start. I hope you like chromatic pentatonicism, because according to this layout, 5 notes is all you're gonna get.
We can make it work.
Here's the thing though, I think that this defect and lack of octave equivalency hints at some incredible new possibilities in microtonal harmony. And by the way, yes, that was your warning. There are microtones all up and down this video. Now, I said that this thing is kind of in A, which you might rightly question my conclusion at first glance. I mean, if we go by the keyboard layout, judging by the accidentals, it looks like it starts on C. But trust me, not only are these accidentals just painted on, but they absolutely do not indicate pitch. This is not C, it's C sharp. So, okay, you might then logically conclude that this is a C sharp major scale that has been transposed onto a C major all the white keys kind of layout, but that's just not the case either. Take a listen. Is that C sharp Phrygian? A pretty dark mode to map out onto a kid's toy. And let's not even get into the mental gymnastics you have to do to square the visual geometry of the misprinted accidental layout with what you actually hear when you play the thing. It's a mind bender, to say the least. So what's going on here? Why do I say that this thing is actually in A? Well, the answer lies in the number line. This number line. If we look here right above the keyboard, you can see that the manufacturer has kindly put scale numbering to indicate where our root note is, assuming that this isn't a misprint too, which at this point it very well could be. We find that this note is labeled as 1, and this note is actually A. So if we start from here, lo and behold, we have our A major scale. Except, it's not really A, is it? Nope, of course not. That would be way too easy.
Why is this so complicated?
And this is where the kind of comes in. Here is a normative mapping of what I believe the manufacturer intended, offset by the degree in cents by which each note is approximately off by. Here we can see the 40-cent variation that establishes our octave inequivalence and what amounts to be a very unique tuning curve. That, by the way, is the polite way of saying
We have an out-of-tune player here.
Mapping like this gives us some interesting insights into the notes that we have to work with. You could probably say, for example, that this C sharp is actually C half sharp, and this D is actually closer to D half flat, and this F sharp could possibly pass for F sesquisharp. So it's a wobbly, dissonant tuning. What of it? Well, I would say that it's about finding beauty in that dissonance. And bear with me for a second. Let's actually take a minute and listen to this thing. There's something I can't quite place my finger on that's really special about this tuning. It feels hazy. The neutral quality between some of these intervals skates by undefined. It manages to capture the essence of a distant foghorn without the annoying volume of an actual foghorn. Some of that has to do with timbre. Especially in the lower range here, the third partial is so prominent in some of these lower notes that you almost hear the fifth just as strongly as you would hear the fundamental. But that only takes you so far. A lot of the fog horniness comes from the relationship between some of these more undefined notes. The distance between this A and this C half sharp creates a neutral third across octaves, an interval which floats between the seldom defined waters between major and minor. It's out of tune, technically, but I don't like looking at it like that because it's also a really neat sound, and I think language matters. When we say things to ourselves like, oh, it's out of tune, we preclude the possibility of taking it seriously enough as a sound to use in our own music. And that would be a shame because this neutral interval, out of tune or not, evokes a certain feeling. And I think that gives it all the validity in the world to explore it musically. So how can we take some of these tuning quirks and apply them across a wide spectra of composition? In other words, I want to be able to replicate some of what's going on in here and apply them to a bunch of different instruments in a bunch of different scenarios. So how do we do that? Well, my immediate thought is just to take the real world tuning map of our toy piano and then program that into the tuning files of virtual instruments. Could that work? Yep, that absolutely can work. It looks a little like this and sounds a lot like this. Now we've essentially digitized this tuning and can now apply it to a bunch of different virtual instruments. That's great, but let's take it a step further and address some of this out of tuneness. 12-tone equal temperament does not have enough data to adequately describe what's going on in our tuning map in terms of notes. That's why I have to describe some of these pitches in ways like A minus 37 cents or F sharp but plus 35 cents. That's fine, but it's not that clean of a solution. So it might be helpful to reframe our understanding of this piano in a way that kind of tempers out some of these weird scent alterations. What if we've been thinking about this all wrong? Our entire premise for understanding the tuning and pitch values of this thing is based off the idea that we're working with a diatonic subset of 12, which is theoretically true, although clearly not practically true. What if there was a way to describe this tuning curve without scent alterations on every note with theory that actually matched observable behavior? That's right. What if we had 31 notes? In a 31 system, most of these notes find their place away from tedious scent alterations. A above our middle A becomes A half flat, B becomes B half flat, C sharp becomes C half sharp, etc., etc. And at this point, you might be thinking, Levi, what does it matter what we label this stuff? It doesn't change the actual sound of the instrument. To which I say, yeah, you're right. No matter what we call this note, it'll always sound the same. But how we think about a concept or an idea can make or break how creative we allow ourselves to be with it. In 31, this note is not poorly defined. In fact, this whole second octave is not poorly defined. We can clearly label it. And with that label, we can see that the octave doesn't just not close perfectly, it closes short by exactly one diesis, the smallest interval available to us in 31. This relationship is consistent throughout the second octave. This note is an octave minus a diesis away from this note, and this note has the same relationship with this note, and so on and so forth. This is almost indescribably interesting because we can take this concept of an octave closure altered by a falling diesis that we then build upon and apply it to a lot of different scenarios. Take the modes. What if we applied this idea to Lydian? So if we start on the 4th degree of our A major scale, D, and then tonicize it, continuing to build the A major starting on D, then of course we have Lydian. But what happens if we decide to close the octave with a falling diesis instead of a 2-to-1 perfect octave? What if we then continued a second octave of Lydian, but displaced it in pitch space by that same diesis? It totally alters the quality of Lydian. Instead of carrying through with an octave equivalent mirror past the 7th note of our mode, which is typical, we start that second run on a flat octave, revealing and evoking this wonderful shimmering quality. Composer and theorist Zheanna Erose often utilizes a similar trick in her music. She calls it double Lydian.
Here is double Lydian. Basically, it's a normal Lydian scale, but when you get to the octave, you restart it on this flat octave. And when you mix them together,
Now we don't have to stop at double Lydian. What about double Phrygian? Or even double Dorian? Exploring these double extensions with our more familiar modes reveals these beautiful, elegant set of systems which totally turn traditional thinking on its head and gives us treasure troves of rich harmonic possibilities to play around with. For example, here is just one quick, immediate observation, which I think illustrates a sea of possibilities when it comes to this concept. In double Lydian, if you construct a triad based off of your root, but you use the flat octaves third instead of the prime octaves third, you'll get a neutral triad. But, and this is where it gets incredibly interesting, if you apply the exact same formula to double Phrygian, you won't get a neutral chord, you'll get a septimal minor, or a subminor chord instead. Each mode accentuates their own unique qualities when you extend them out as double modes. Phrygian becomes a lot darker, a lot more brooding, while Lydian becomes more hazy, more whimsical, more dreamlike. I'm not gonna lie, this toy piano started off as a menace, an out-of-tune nightmare full of factory defects and a nearly unplayable 2-octave stretch. But with just a small change in approach, a tiny tweak in mindset, we took a defect and turned it into a strength. A strength, by the way, which essentially revealed a whole new harmonic composition device in the falling diesis alteration and the revelation of double modes. Sometimes it's helpful to not just close the book on it's out of tune. I'm gonna play us out to a little jam I've been working on in Doublelydian. I highly recommend you take some time and check out some of Zheanna's work. It's truly cutting edge stuff, so I've linked her down below. If you like this video and you're interested in how to make microtonal music for yourself, come study with me. I have an entire lecture series over on Patreon which delves all into microtonality and how to make music in 31 Edo. We await you with open arms and, of course, a whole lot of notes.